Well, bad news. War may be closer than you think, or closer than Australia is prepared for. On Friday and Saturday, China sent 77 warplanes into Taiwan's air defence zone, the most ever in its near daily buzzing of Taiwan. It sent 38 warplanes on Friday, including nuclear-capable bombers, and 39 the next day, flying to the south of this island democracy with 24 million people that China says must come under Chinese control. Now, the Chinese dictator has told his military to prepare for war, and China's official Global Times newspaper today was absolutely chilling. It said China's military, the PLA, had carried out wide-ranged operations near Taiwan to familiarise itself with battlefield conditions. And once the order to attack is given, the pilots will fight as experienced veterans. The PLA is forming a siege of Taiwan. Now, you could not get a more explicit warning that China is preparing to invade Taiwan if it thinks it can get away with it with Dozy Joe Biden in the White House. And if it does invade, the US and us, we're going to either help defend Taiwan, go to war, or accept that China, this dictatorship, is now the master of our part of the world and our freedoms are diminished. But it's only now that Australia is frantically trying to get ready to defend itself. And that is why 2 weeks ago, the Prime Minister, the Defence Minister, the Foreign Affairs Minister, top intelligence chiefs were all in Washington at the same time for talks with the US, Britain, Japan and India. And not just to get us nuclear subs, but to get more military technology here very fast. Maybe even get the US and Britain to park some submarines here urgently. So I can't stress enough how serious this threat is. Yet we have been so slack and so blind and so greedy for Chinese trade for so long. I was joined a short while ago by a man who has been very astute for a long time on this threat. It's Mr Shoebridge. He was a former senior defence and intelligence official. He's now at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, director of its Defence Strategy and National Security Program. I asked him how close we are now to war.
Hard to tell, but we know that Xi Jinping is a risk taker. And that's the problem. The kind of military pressure and intimidation that he's putting around Taiwan means we've got to take him seriously. And he's got to understand the kind of consequences if he uses force against Taiwan.
Well, we've had 77 Chinese warplanes sent into this airspace near Taiwan over 2 days, forcing Taiwanese Air Force to scramble. The Chinese media has been saying that this is preparing for battlefield conditions. What do you think they're doing?
I think that's what they're doing because I take what Xi says seriously. He said that Taiwan is no longer a problem that can be left to future generations, and he's told the PLA to prepare for war at a moment's notice, and now he's ratcheting up the military intimidation of Taiwan. I think some of this is him trying to get the Chinese people behind him as leader because he's got some difficult things happening domestically with the economy and with the party. But some of it is his vision of him being the man that brings Taiwan back to mainland China.
I want to get back to his motives in a sec, but just how could war break out? Now, it could, of course, China, the dictator could just order an attack and that's how it starts. But is there also a risk of an inadvertent clash? Like a mistake could be made. These planes could get too close. There are so many of them. Someone could snap. Who knows? Do you think there's a risk of an accidental war here?
I do, and I think it's made a higher risk because he's really told the PLA to be aggressive, to be wolf warriors, and they will be rewarded. Well, you're telling young fighter pilots and young bomber pilots to get out there and be aggressive. That raises the possibility of collisions and conflict. And the problem with that happening with junior military people is, can the leadership disown them, or do they have to make it look like it was all part of a plan? That's how escalation into conflict could happen.
Now, I'm wondering whether the Morrison government knows more than it's saying about a likely war. It's acting like it's more frightened. Maybe I'm reading too much into this. 2 weeks ago, though, we saw something that I think is unprecedented. Almost all our top national security figures were in Washington at the same time. That's the Prime Minister, the Defence Minister, the Foreign Affairs Minister, top intelligence chiefs, very senior army people, and so on, to have talks with the US, Britain, Japan, India, all countries very, very worried about the rise of China. What did this, as I say, unprecedented series of meetings tell you?
Well, it told me that the AUKUS announcement isn't all about long-distance nuclear submarines. There's a real acceleration of military cooperation happening. And AUKUS, for example, the Australia, UK, US arrangement, is as much about accelerating real capabilities into the hands of our military in the short and medium term as it is about the long vision of nuclear submarines. You only do that if your security environment demands it. And Australia's security environment has worsened, as has the other countries in AUKUS and the members of the Quad, India, Japan, the US and Australia. This has all happened because of the aggression of Xi. So it tells you, with all those officials gathering together, this isn't seen as a hypothetical problem. It's seen as a problem to confront now. And the primary goal has to be to deter Beijing from using force.
Now, you, as you said earlier, we've got the dictator, Xi Jinping. He's been saying prepare for war. It's been a long-term promise of his that he will unite China with Taiwan, which he doesn't consider an independent democracy, an independent country, but a renegade promise. His threatened invasion, all that. But is there also a possibility of a wag the dog scenario where he's got internal divisions, internal problems, and he will feel necessary to unite China, the nationalist movement behind him, or distract people or whatever? You suggested this earlier in the interview. Are there other motives that might dictate that President Xi wants war?
Yes, and war is a great nationalist card to unify a country behind a leader. So Xi can use conflict to unify the party and the people behind him. And why would he want to do that now? Well, the property development sector, which is a huge driver of the Chinese economy, is in trouble. We can see that with the massive financial trouble of Evergrande. The party itself is going through rolling purges, where the latest one is a vice minister from the internal security apparatus who was too ambitious, was forming groups and was rumour mongering. That tells you Xi wants to distract the Chinese people from the trouble he's got in the past, and he's got trouble in the economy. All that means a bit of nationalism now. With a Taiwan conflict or escalation could be in Xi's interests, and that's dangerous. He's got to be told the consequences are bigger than just his domestic political calculation.
Well, that purge of that senior security figure was very interesting. He's a graduate of the University of New South Wales. I'm not sure whether they taught him how to be a democracy advocate in a dictatorship or whether they didn't educate him properly at all. Who knows? But that purge is fascinating. Michael Shoebridge, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks very much, Andrew.